If a player cleans his ball during play of a hole, except on the putting green, he shall incur a penalty of 1 stroke. That's the rule, Jerry.
But it's just a friendly game. Why do you always have to be such a stickler?
Because that's the way I was raised.
Welcome to Spirit of the Game, brought to you by the Colorado Golf Association. Now here's your host, Ed Mate.
It's that time again, time for another Spirit of the Game, coming at you for the month of October edition. And as always, I always start out, Eric, by saying I'm so excited. I try to listen back on these, and then I realize that I can't do it. I'm a navel gazer, but only to a certain point. So Eric Iverson, welcome to Spirit of the Game. You drinking a beer there?
No, that's a soda. That's a flavored soda.
Okay, good. And by the way, this is audio only, so you can drink whatever you want. Nobody will know.
Okay.
All right. So let's start out. For those
soda.
who don't know the name Eric Iverson, I could go on and on about your background, but much more fun to hear you explain your background. So let's start with your golf birth story. I'm going to just say, by way of context, Eric is the many years been in the golf course architecture game. He was the principal architect who built CommonGround. So if you love CommonGround, you love Eric Iverson's work, whether you know it or not. You see the name Tom Doak on there, but the guy in the boots on the ground was Eric Iverson. So Eric, take it away. Tell us about yourself, how you got started in golf.
Thanks, Ed. Nice to be with you today. I think my entry into both golf and the golf course design business, I think both those are pretty good stories. So I'll try to keep them short. But my older brother got into golf. My dad had a very passing interest and just brought my brother along to see if he had any interest in playing. And of course, I wanted to do everything my older brother did. So that was kind of the initial entry into it. And as my brother, got more into it, I just started hanging out a little bit more with him, just going to Indian Tree and just kind of loitering around. And the real tipping point was as the older kids were, playing the big course. I was just kind of hanging out on the par 3, or not even the par 3, at the putting green, just chipping and putting and generally loitering until my brother got done playing. And Vic Klein came out and noticed that. And he said, I tell you what, if you pick up, you remember all the pull tabs on the soda cans from when we were kids.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty acceptable to just kind of toss them on the ground, kind of around the golf shop. He's like, I know we've come a long way. But he said, if you pick all these up, you can play the par 3 for the rest of the day. And I did. And, it's the middle of summer, baseball was over. So I was there the next day. There was only like three tabs on the ground the next morning. So I give Vic Klein a lot of credit.
You know that he just passed
carrying
away.
on.
Did
he really?
Yeah, just like in the last.
How long ago?
Days. So that we'll dedicate
the last couple days, really.
Yeah, he was 90. So we'll dedicate this pod to Charles Vic Klein. Certainly, mentored a lot of young golfers just like you. How about that?
He really did, and I'm glad you let me know that. Yeah. God bless him. I mean, he was just a you also know my best friend growing up who really locked into. He and I were just locked into golf at the earliest age. Jeff Gomez. We would be just out there putting, and Vic would pop out and say, let's putt 9 holes for a Coke, and we would putt a little 9-hole putting match. And Vic was a really good player, certainly in his day.
Yeah.
And he would kill us and he'd just say, go tell Gloria I owe you a Coke. And he didn't shoo us off at all. He just made it, possible for us to kind of hang around and get into golf with very little barrier to entry. Which was awesome.
Indian Tree has certainly been the birthplace for many a golfer. That's for sure. So you're on a long list. So
yeah, It's a good model. And then as far as the rest of the golf business, getting into the design side, that was just kind of right place, right time. Um, kind of uh, went to college for a year, and then kind of that semester break, or the summer break, was when Riverdale Dunes was being built,
Mhm.
and just got a summer job up there. Seemed interesting, and it was just a really cool experience. And it was just a bunch of young guys out there that, it's like, wow, this is just a bunch of knuckleheads like me who like golf that are doing this. It doesn't seem like it could be, that hard. And so I just kind of stuck with it. And there was so much going on that, you know, warm bodies were needed. So that just kind of worked out for me to kind of jump in and,
So
and carry on from there.
who were some of those young knuckleheads that might have gone on from that? They're still
Yeah,
knuckleheads. They're just not young
yeah, they
anymore.
are. They are. They are. There's a bunch of them. Again, my brother Neil was involved. There was a guy named John Reidinger was running the project. He was 26 years old. He was a turf guy from Michigan State. Uh, and then there was also a whole slew of, interns. They were from, they were turf student interns from Michigan State. There were three of them.
Hmm.
Ken Zach, Tim Furness, who I later learned a bunch from, and Bob Hoover. And then after the summer break let out, Jim Urbina was also he had worked at Plum Creek first,
Mm-hmm.
but he was teaching school at the time. That when the early spring when I started, but once school was out, he spent a couple months there that summer as well. So yeah, it was just, and we were all working for Perry Dye. Pete was out, two or three times during that project. But that was generally Perry's work. And that's also where I met Tom. Tom had finished up working for Pete in Palm Springs and was on his way back from Southern California to New York. And Pete asked that he stop by Denver and check in with Perry and see if he couldn't help out a little bit on his way back. And that's where I met Tom the first time.
And
Tom
just for
shaped a bunch of those
clarity, for
greens.
those that don't know the Tom, that's Tom Doak, who you went on to work built a lot of golf courses together. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it was cool. And he was young and I was younger, and but it was just a really fun time. And I've always thought, and bias aside, just as a golfer, I've always thought Riverdale is just such a cool project and such a cool golf course up there. And there really wasn't anything like it at the time. Um,
True. I just played
and
there a
it's
couple of weeks ago for the first time in years, and I just love that place. And I grew up playing
cool.
City Park, and when Riverdale opened, I bought one of their 10 punches, and I pretty much made my home. I was like, I've never, I was a City Park guy, so it was pretty special to play, and
Yeah.
it certainly stood the test of time for sure.
Yeah. It's just such a cool course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Always been a fan.
So when did you really? Well, did you finish college, or did
No,
you? Okay.
no. So I basically, I decided I was going to just take a pause as
Uh-huh.
summer turned to fall. And it's like, well, we're starting up this thing in Phoenix. If you want to go to Phoenix in September, and I'm like, yeah, I definitely want to go to Phoenix.
Where were you
So
going to college?
just at Metro in Denver,
Okay. So
yeah.
you're still
So
in
it
that pause.
wasn't a big thing. Yeah. So I'm just like, well, yeah, I can do this anytime, but I'm having the time of my life doing this golf
Yeah.
stuff. And um, yeah, there was just a lot going on. So it was a really pretty easy decision to make. And then,
So when did I was listening
carried
to
on.
one of the podcasts, I think it was the Fried Egg, and I can't remember. It was either Bruce Hepner or one of the many shapers out there, and they said, "Who's the best shaper you've ever worked with?" And they said, Eric Iverson. So High Cotton, whoever it was. So I know you're a very humble guy, legitimately, not the false humble, where people say, "Oh, I'm very humble." What are they talking about? You're a legitimately humble guy. Um, and so we won't dwell on whether you're the best shaper, but you're obviously among you've done it a long time and you're obviously pretty good at it. How has shaping changed? I mean, when we say shaping, explain what that means for those that are less familiar with architecture. I'm sure I'll learn something from the answer. What does it mean? How do you do it? And how has it changed?
Well, shaping has always been part of getting golf courses built from, from the golden age on, whether it's, just taking input from some drawings like, the Flynn Ross type hole grids with a green detail. Those are pretty much like the standard back then. And depending on how busy they were, where in the country they were, would kind of dictate how many, um, how often they were on site. But somebody's left to just be like, okay, we're looking at this, Ross plan for Salem Country Club, and these are the general dimensions of the green, and this is up, 3 feet back here, 2 feet back here, 1 foot, plus 1 foot at the front of the green, um, a mound over here and a swale over here. Well, there's a lot of interpretation to taking something like that and seeing how it ends up. So all the Golden Age guys had, trusted um, superintendents, really construction superintendents, uh, that they kind of relied on to get that work right. Um, and then as it kind of evolved, the next stop on the train is probably the 50s, the post-war years. Robert Trent Jones was really kind of leading the way. Um, by the time the war, World War II was over, we were certainly ushered into the era of all the diesel powered machinery. So the game changed substantially then. The design business, where you could really move all the dirt you want. It didn't even have to be sandy soil, or you could really just do whatever you needed to do, and then but you still have the element of shaping to kind of make bunkers look how they look and greens look how they look.
So how are the Golden Age architects, let's say Donald Ross, say something in the 1910, 20, how were they shaping? What equipment did they use? Shovel?
Usually it was just like, yeah, there was a little bit of there was a few steam shovels where they could, push things around, but a lot of horse pulled scrapers.
Yeah.
It's like just kind of like, um, uh, imagine just like kind of a, giant two-handled thing pulled by
Yeah.
a horse or two, and just like scoop it out of here and dump it here, and and it can go actually pretty quickly, just like kind of one bite at a time. And
Yeah.
labor was very inexpensive, so it wasn't uncommon to have 100 people, working on building the golf course, where today
Yeah.
it might be 20 or 30 with the machines.
Yeah.
But overall, there's always, the link is always just about the, just making the idea into what's there on the ground, and kind of, interpreting what, uh, whoever's design it is, or whoever is kind of calling the shots on anything that's, being worked on. Just trying to effectively get those ideas, in the ground. Um, and kind of as it's evolved, um, I think the one really, there's been so many like really ridiculously good breaks that have kind of fallen my way, right from stumbling into picking up pop tabs for Vic Klein. Is it was really, Pete Dye was the one who was really building the golf courses that he was designing, and not doing it by plans, and that was pretty unusual then. And that's right about the time when Riverdale popped up, and Tom was kind of
Mhm.
deciding, if everybody else is going to zig, then it's time somebody has to zag, and I'm gonna carry on what I learned from Pete, which is to be there and build them yourself, even though the design philosophy was completely different. But that's really that was kind of the beginning of the design build era. So in 86, 87 to 95 beyond, it was a rarity. The design build model was really rare. And fast forward 20 years, now it is absolutely just the industry standard. Everybody just does the same thing. You have some, design ideas you want, but you're always looking for talented people that um, want to be involved to help shape things. And there's a lot of super talented people out there building golf courses now. It's pretty cool.
So when you're shaping today, what equipment are you using? And what is it? An excavator? Is it a bulldozer? Is it depend? What is the actual equipment?
Well, certainly dozers and excavators are the standard, and sand pros around the green, and a lot of raking. If you're like doing some really detailed stuff in a green, for like you're finishing off for seeding, it's like sometimes you just you can drive over something a million times with a sand pro, and whether it's you're still on a machine that's got a flat spot that's 5.5 feet wide. And it's like, sometimes you're just better off just parking it, and you can shape it with a rake in 60 seconds and be done with it. Yeah, I mean, that's the main thing. The other thing that's really, really prevalent now is a skid steer loader. That's the we've all kind of seen the little buggies with the traditionally they had 4 wheels, and they're really bouncy, and they could kind of move around in really tight spaces. But now they have those on tracks, kind of call them posi track machines. And if I was younger, I would invest more time to learn how to be proficient on those. But pardon me, some of the people that have come up, in that era, and kind of lean on those a little bit more heavily, can do really incredible work in really tight spaces. So it's also a really handy tool to have.
How many greens do you think you have shaped in your career? Have you ever counted?
I started counting at one point a while ago, and it depends on if you count like I think of each green is basically two bites at the apple. You've got the initial shaping before drainage and irrigation and sand installation and all that stuff. And then basically you've got to kind of reshape it again to finish it, to, because the subtleties, when you build something up 16 inches, particularly, technology the last 30 years, it's much better now.
Mm-hmm.
But, you can't rely on every, quarter of an inch being accurate all the way up. So there would be a second go around where you do the finished work and just make sure that it's exactly, how it was meant to be, before you seed it, because that's your one shot
Right.
ever, So if you count both of those, it's, probably closing in on 1,000, but it's a lot.
At 500, you're counting each green as 2 bites at the apple. You'd say it's close to 1,000.
That's right. That's right.
So I know it's and don't tell me they're like all my children. It's like picking my favorite child. You're not allowed to answer the question that way. What greens stand out for any reason? I mean, if you had to say give me your top 10 greens and it doesn't have to be because you think they're the best, but just for whatever reason, they stick with you because there was a story behind them or something that you had to overcome, because again, the green is everything, don't you think? Though, first of all, let's just sort of I've heard this quote, and it's attributed to Donald Ross, that the green is to a golf course what the face is to a human being. A golf course, the greens are so important. So it's hard to argue that. I think you You'd agree with that? So what are
Yes.
your favorite faces are your most memorable?
That was actually Charles Blair McDonald talking about
Oh,
the National, but
okay.
yeah, which you know um, was a big influence in what we did at Common Ground. 10's way too many for starters.
Okay.
10 greens is too many.
Okay. Out
I'm
of a
not. I'm not. I'm
thousand,
not
I
that.
thought that
I'm
I
not.
thought
I'm not. I'm not that. I'm not that decisive. And it's, I think it's like you know, there are incredible locations, like
yeah,
incredible green sites
yeah.
that certainly ring a bell. And there's also a great deal of satisfaction that can be taken from building something out of nothing. Like
Hmm.
I rescued this thing from the dregs of despair, and actually it turned out to be pretty cool. So
But give me an example
that's
of
somewhat
one.
there.
Give me an example of one of each. One where the green site was just like, well, I'm proud of it because I didn't do anything. Or
So they
the
have
other
to be.
is,
Can they be just greens that people know whether I built them or not, or do they need to be things that I worked on?
well, I would like it to be ones that
Okay.
if you don't want it, because I know you don't want to call any
No,
attention
it's
to
just like
yourself.
you do kind of love them all for
Yeah.
sure. But I'll have to think about that for a little bit. Let's just pick a golf course. Uh, we'll start with there's a really cool, very subtle uh, green on the eighth hole at Childress Hall, which is a course that I uh, helped Tom with the last couple years. It actually went really quick, and basically it's just a the green side kind of sat in a bowl, and you play up over a ridge, and if you drive it tight to the right side, then you can see in, and if you bail out left, then you can't see over the ridge, but a little of the green kind of sneaks out. And I ended, there was a couple of versions tried, and I just ended up scooting the green over to the right and raised it up about a foot, so it was a little easier to see based on various tee shots, and it just really tied in, you know, really elegantly well, and it just doesn't look like there's much going on until you get on it, and then there's a lot of really great little, um, it's not severe, but it's
Mhm.
just really got some beautiful subtle hole locations and little confounding little contours in it that, that would be an example of just a really nice simple thing without much going on, where it didn't take a real heavy hand to come up with some really interesting golf, um, which was really good. And then as far as great places, you find yourself parked looking over the North Atlantic at a place like St. Patrick's, and that's an example of you know that's an example of having a 24 incher to win the Ryder Cup, and it's like, yeah, yeah, it's nerve wracking, and you should do a great job, and this sure turned out great, but you're
Yeah.
there because you're supposed to be able to handle it.
Yeah.
Um, and so some of those are really good, but
Northern
but
Ireland, for those
really,
that don't know where that is.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but really, I mean, he just wanted to be. Uh, I always think of the my favorite greens are the ones that just fit in really nicely, um, and sometimes they're severe and sometimes they're subtle. But if they're severe, that it's not gratuitously so. Like
Hmm.
a lot of people will kind of whinge about these greens are that this severe and too severe over here or whatnot, and I always evaluate that as, well, what's the basis for it being severe? And if
Hmm.
it's a really beautiful green site where the overall fall of the land is like 5 or 6%, well, a really well designed green is going to have a few little steps in it to kind of accommodate that being pretty steep, you know? Um, so that's kind of, I look at them all a little bit differently, and that's the beauty of a round of golf being 18 holes is you really get a chance to experience hopefully a few different you know uh, few different types of greens and levels of severity and small, large, contoured, simple, whatever that really just fit with the rest of the hole and fit the green side itself.
So let's go back to 2008, 2009. You were working on a couple local golf courses. We were very fortunate to
Mm-hmm.
have your full attention in the construction of this funny golf association that had this idea of trying to make something out of the old Mira Vista Lowry Air Force Base golf course. Yeah, so just talk about that project and then just to kind of get the juices flowing. At the same on the heels of that, you went over to Cherry Hills to do some work on that, and the compare and contrast between those two sort of clients and the projects themselves. So what were the highlights of the Common Ground that project for you over the thousands of that you've been involved, thousands of greens? What stood out about that project?
The one thing that I really appreciate more and more about Common Ground is it's a better piece of land as a canvas for a golf course than a lot of people have given credit for over the years. Um, Granted, it doesn't have like big sweeping contour and tilt like or you know natural features everywhere, but it's really got plenty of just gentle movement throughout um, and room to do some interesting things. Um, but it was, we were really excited for that. We really believed in, what your whole thing was about, in terms of just, you and I both grew up playing public golf. Tom grew up playing public golf. Don Plasick, your fellow Evans Scholar, public golfer. Uh, Schneider and Slonick, who you've also met. Everybody, we kind of all had the same background and a real appreciation for what you were trying to do. So that was a great opportunity for us, particularly at a time when, as the opportunities got better and better, we're building these really remote places for really wealthy people that, play host for a lot of other really wealthy people. So it was really cool to do a course like Common Ground. And then the other thing was, Tom's always been, you know, um, championing the cause of it goes by a lot of names. Some people use minimalism as a way to describe the design style, but it's also just a way to approach just building golf courses and golf itself. It's like if you've got some decent land, you shouldn't need to go crazy and spend a ton of money. So I think the part that really attracted him, one, it was Jim and Don and I all had an attachment to Denver, so it was really special for us in that regard. But I think maybe the thing that really attracted him was to be able to show that we can do something really cool and really interesting without spending, what at the moment was really kind of an escalating, uh, price tag for building a new golf course. And we really believed in that. And, that was one of my favorite parts of the project, working with Tracy Richard and with Dwight McCormick from ACC and Darren Flanagan.
Yeah.
And we really were like, we all got on great, and we were all basically on the same team of, let's squeeze this lemon for like every drop it's got. And that's easy from Tracy's perspective, and certainly from my perspective, because it didn't matter. But you really got to hand it to Dwight and ACC as your contractors out there, being good partners and not trying to like squeeze you for every change order or any little extra they could. They really were good, honest partners in that whole thing. So that whole project was just a big feel good one for us.
Yeah. And I don't have anything to compare it to because it was the one project that I got to be so close to. So I don't have any
You should stop.
contextual.
Just stop right where you are.
It's not one for one, thanks to you
Exactly.
and team.
Yeah.
It was fascinating to me as you guys were working the leapfrogging and the staging of, you finishing up a hole and you needed it. It's like a house. You got to get all the subcontractors in line. It's not like you grass a golf course on the same day. It's all a series of, it's a beautiful ballet of sorts where it has to happen. And that was a real epiphany for me because I just assumed that you do the full thing all at once and then you do the shaping all at once and then you do the grassing and it's not that way at all. It's very much working in phases throughout the entire site.
Yeah. You can think of it like it's like a train and there's 20 cars and basically the train moves all at once, but each car is just doing something different in sequence with the rest of it. Yeah, it's fun. And, that's kind of the most efficient way to do it. And we had the right amount of time. We weren't squeezed by anything. We didn't need too much time. That's another kind of a thing that when I say we, I mean like Renaissance Golf, Tom, our whole sphere, and it comes from Tom's influence, but we don't dilly dally around. So
yeah.
You need enough time and you should be able to just get it done at that time. And, sometimes you have something unforeseen, goes against you, but generally, it was just kind of set up to succeed, and it went pretty smoothly, really, and it was great fun.
So, last question about Common Ground before we move on here, and I guess, but it's a broader question about the way you work as a company with Tom, and how you guys collaborate. And I heard several of you guys, you, Brian, both Brians, talk about edits to your work. So, let's talk about some examples of a Tom Doak edit and what that might look like, and what Tom's role is once the routing's done and you're now building the features. How does the interaction walk us through how it starts from beginning to end and what Tom's role is in overseeing the work and signing off on a green, for example?
Yeah. So if we're talking about basically a traditional, one of his new designs where we've kind of got the big team together, there's usually going to be 6 to 12, let's say, greens where he knows pretty specifically what he wants to do. There's part of what he's really great at is finding good green sites on good land. So once that's kind of determined, he's kind of already figured out what the green is going to be like on a lot of them. And then there's usually 6 or 9 that he's like, well, we can make a green out of this. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet, and we'll go from there. So kind of in the lead up to a big, one of his visits, we'll try to have 5 or 6 holes, 5 or 6 green sites to work on. And a lot of times he'll just say, try something on this hole or that hole, and we'll just see what it looks like when we get there. Don't touch this hole because I know exactly what I want to do there, and I don't want you to erase anything. So, just wait till I get there for that one, and then we'll kind of basically proceed like that. So, for the holes that he's kind of not really one way or the other on, we will just have something built in and make sure that it works and the golf works and it's not too steep and ties in and everything and just kind of works with what's there. And then, as he's there, he notoriously doesn't make any decisions the first day. I think he got that from Bill Coore, but I'm not sure. But yeah, he's like, he'll get there and walk it and just kind of sleep on it and then kind of figure out what he wants to do. And a lot of times what ends up happening is, you don't build the holes in sequence either, aside from what you were talking about.
Yeah.
The process wise, you rarely are building them 1 through 18. You're hopping around to various parts of the property. So a lot of times, you'll have something and he's like, man, that looks great. I love it. And then, you come back the next morning and he's like, that's exactly, or really close to what I was thinking of doing over on 14. So one of them has to change. So I don't know, I'll think about that. And then he'll decide which one he wants to change, whether he's going to do something different on the one that he knew what he wanted to do or the one that we already did. It's like, yeah, we'll just make it different this way, or maybe the whole plays a little bit differently that way. So he's just kind of cognizant there. And then, the kind of the upside of all the greens that, Brian and I have built for Tom, we also know, we never fall in love with anything. And we also take it just far enough that we're not wasting a ton of time grinding out every, little detail. It's like, this is good. It works. I've allowed myself a day to work on this thing. And at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, that's 95% there. If we think we're going to keep it, this is the last little thing I would do is I'd make this back shelf just a little bit bigger because I thought it was a little small or something. But, we'll save that until we see if it's something that Tom wants to keep or not. So those are the edits. So a lot of times, there's just like, conceptually, I want to do something, he'll want to do something, big and specific. And other times it's like, wow, I really like that. That looks awesome. Let's just make this back thing a little bit bigger. And in exchange, let's make this a little bit smaller. Great example would be 5 at CommonGround.
Okay.
So 5 at CommonGround was actually still going to be the biggest green on the course. We had all kind of, we're pretty careful with our resources, but it's like, well, one of these greens out in this big space has got to be a biggie. And I had that 5th green, basically the whole front. There wasn't much to the front of the green, and it was kind of tucked behind the bunker on the right. And Tom's like, let's just drape it up and over that slope in the front and just make it even bigger, but just have a little bit more of a usable hole location kind of out in the front as a result. And, sometimes that's an example of an edit to where, yeah, things are, this is generally pretty good, but I'd like to make it bigger, smaller, whatever.
Right. So you were just out at CommonGround. So I thought I was leaving CommonGround, but I'm not. And you just built shaped a bunker on the 16th hole. And a lot of our listeners obviously are very familiar with CommonGround, probably more so than St. Patrick's, your other reference. We're probably not going to, most of us won't make it to. Someday I'd love to make it to Northern Ireland to see that place. It looks pretty spectacular. So talk about trees as a category. A lot of, if you pay any attention to golf course architecture at all, you'll know that over the last, 50 years, there's been a movement away from trees. At least that's the way it seems. And seems like countless examples of courses that have cut down all the trees. And I was just picked up matter of fact, I could point to it. It's over my shoulder here. Some stuff that one of our former board members, MJ, donated, and MJ Mastelier, and it's an aerial photograph of Denver Country Club, and it's just tree lined, and they're all gone. And I have very mixed feelings on this because I grew up caddying there, and I'm nostalgic about the tree lined fairways and the stateliness of a old venerable parkland course. And now all the trees are gone. and it's kind of weird when I stand on the first tee at Denver Country Club, and there's the fifth green right there, and it was a forest between you and that fifth green when I was caddying there. So,
Hmm.
what is your take on the current pendulum swing on trees and golf design?
I think it's bouncing back a little bit. Uh, I tend to, I don't think I wouldn't say that the trees are necessarily like making a comeback as a design feature, but I think everybody that plays golf and you know sees a lot of really cool old courses. They don't have necessarily be famous. Can probably identify a few that maybe the tree removal has gone a little bit far for whatever reason. And there's a lot of different criteria that goes into making that decision on where you're gonna land on the tree spectrum, really. Um, but I think the best way to look at it, in the macro sense, is you've got the original corridors that were laid out by whoever the architect was. I always use Salem is a great example. It's a club that I work with in Boston, and all of the original clearing through the red oak forest is obviously where it was, no more, no less.
Hmm.
So any course, you've got the original corridors set up by the architect. In the 50s, 60s, you had a pretty big push for the beautification of America. You know, everything was plentiful in the 50s, including inexpensive trees, and a lot of clubs planted trees. Those tended to be, inside the original clearing lines. And then there was a big boom like in the 80s and 90s where, you know, green committees, club management, what have you, went further still with the trees and basically taking any open space and plugging it with trees. So most old golf courses, if they haven't been kind of tended to already with trees, kind of have three distinct layers. And usually, certainly that inner layer is absolutely just too much, and it's taken away from good angles and good features in the landscape and make golf courses feel unnecessarily small. And with rare exceptions, those should go. The stuff in the 50s, usually the golf courses had a little bit less irrigation, so they were firmer and faster with kind of bigger fairways. And a lot of times you'll find a lot of those trees planted in the 50s are in reasonably good spots and, have some room. And now they're 80 years old. And if, depending on the species, if they were a longer lived species, then, they might be spectacular trees that are kind of like the new, anchors of the landscape. So some of those are kind of worth working with. Uh, and or you can take it back to the original, and that's been pretty popular. But if you're certainly in Denver, it's a little harder to grow an 80-foot deciduous tree than it is, on the eastern seaboard. So it's a little harder to see those come down, and you'll definitely hear like the elite players really, kind of lament the fact that a lot of these great old golf courses, they feel like the trees have, you know, tree removal has really made courses easier for them, and that may well be the case, but uh, the world doesn't revolve around them, and
Right.
it has made it has tree removal in general has just made a lot of golf courses a lot better and a lot more enjoyable for uh, the average player and the average member. So I think it's like anything. It's like, there is such thing as too much of a good thing. And I feel like we've kind of bounced up against the edge there, and now it's coming back. I mean, it became such a trend. It became such a popular thing that people kind of almost got dogmatic about it, as opposed to, there's a few, like I personally look at it as, here are a few criteria. Is it in the way of the golf? Like being, a way to play a hole, or just people end up, and it's just like, is it in the way? Is it causing turf problems? What kind of shape is it in?
Mm-hmm.
Is it, in decline, and, you got like 3 branches with leaves left on it. It's like, there's no sense leaving that. Um, and what value does it, is it blocking some phenomenal view that we'd really like to get back? Or is it just kind of another tree amongst other trees, and the view doesn't really change that much? So if it's kind of a no harm, no foul tree, then, there's no real rush to take it out, even if there's some pressure from, well, it wasn't here before. And it's like, well, yeah, but it's here now, and it's a really nice tree, and it's not really changing the hole in any material way.
Yeah,
And
it's not hurting turf conditions. It's not a safety
yeah,
issue. Yeah,
yeah.
leave it alone.
And
So we had,
as avid walkers, that are closing in on 60, if not already there, little shade on a hot day
Yeah.
near the tees,
That's
not
right.
necessarily a bad thing.
So 16 at Common Ground was for many their favorite hole. And I think it was their favorite hole now that the trees are gone. It's a wonderful hole with or without trees. And I think even those, it's the movement of the land, it's the rise and fall in the green site, and the fundamental bones of that hole are so good. And the trees just added, and I think in some ways the trees that were there when we built it kind of hid the underlying quality of that hole. So the two together, it was almost like just a beautiful marriage of tree and shade and contrast. And so the trees are gone. They've all checked out at different times, all cottonwoods that had a good run, as you said, grandma, grandpa. And I think there were 2 of them on the far side and 2 on the corner at least. There may have been more than 4. You tend to forget. I was just doing, and we have this archived, and if you look at the flyovers of the golf course that are on our website, and you look at 16 and 17, you can get a pretty good view of those trees. So we just made the decision to take out the last vestige of those trees, and it was very much the tree you were just describing. It was a clinging to life, having that last sort of gasp with, where it's growing from the bottom up. It's like sprouting weird growths to try to, somehow get some nutrients into what's left. And we had you out, and we were debating, should we just try to keep that thing going and, say our prayers every night, and walk us through the removal of that tree and what, because we've been talking about this for years. I look back, and I think it was in 2020 we had you out in anticipation of this day coming and the decision to put a bunker in there. So I'd love to get your thoughts on how you approach that, and how you listened to us and ultimately built the bunker that you did, which will be ready for play here, actually, maybe before the end of the season. I don't know. We'll see. Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, everybody loved those trees on 16, and that was one of the, there weren't a ton of really nice trees on the property when we were working, but that was a little section that, that was all the trees just kind of fit. They didn't need to come out. And the last one was at one of the 2, like on the corner. And that's kind of a classic place for great trees to be, is the inside corner of a dogleg. So the hole was kind of just routed around it. But you've always got to be careful when you do that, because things like this happen. Trees meet their demise, and they're not always going to be there. And there was a little bit of talk about, replacing those trees, but it's a harsh place to grow, big deciduous trees. And when you're talking about something on the inside of a dogleg, and you're gonna take down a 50-foot cottonwood and replace it with a 3-inch caliper tree that is not even going to, it's going to just sit there for the first 2 or 3 years, and then it's going to start growing a little bit. And you and I will both be long gone before that's any semblance of
Right.
the tree that it was. So
All it does
sometimes,
is all that does is like salt in the wounds. It just makes you realize.
yeah. And then it's just, yeah, then you live with something that's really kind of crummy for,
Yeah.
20 years because the trees are undersized for what's there. And if you look at the background now of that tee shot, it's just like, boom, right up the hill, 18, the big hillside with all the fescue and the cool bunkers. It's like, it's a pretty grand, it always was a grand setting, but now it's like, you just see more from the tee. So yeah, I'm a big, um, opponent of replacing trees, because if a tree was of any significance, that it was, worth working around, once it's gone, it's gone. And it's just, you should just move on. Anything that you plant, if you planted one while it's still alive, then you've got an extra tree that's in the way, that's either blocking the tree that you covet, or it's on the other side blocking recovery play. There's just no really good
Yeah, it's
examples of
interesting.
that.
When you
Maybe
yeah.
like Pebble. Like if you've got the money, like Pebble, to like bring in a big cypress, spend $100,000 moving a tree. Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. But beyond that, just like have a plan B.
No, it's interesting because what you're describing, I remember going to a superintendent's conference and there was a talk about trees and the concept of underplanting in anticipation of the day coming. And it seems like, and it's easy now for me to agree with what you just said, but I never really thought about it. It's like that sounds great in theory, but you're now introducing another hungry thing that needs nutrients to compete with the other big hungry thing that's been there forever, like a barnacle on the back of a whale or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
But I also loved what you said. When grandma dies, you celebrate the times you had with her. You don't plan a new grandma.
that's it. That's it.
I'm going to quote you on that one. All right, I've been saying that we're going to get to Cherry Hills. So now so you're done at Common Ground. You've had the run of the place with really other than the environmental company that had to watch every passing movement of every shovel or spade or whatever. You were free to do what you wanted. Now you go to Cherry Hills and you've got this very old club that's the most well known in this region, and now you're working in a much different environment. And so just talk a little bit about that project. And it sounds like you're kind of that project is still very much you're still involved. It's not when you have a club like
Yeah.
that where you're the consulting architect. So just what does that look? What did the original project that you did there look like, and what does it look like today?
Well, Cherry Hills is actually the course that I reference when I was talking before about the three generations of trees.
Mm.
You know, there was just a few volunteers around the water courses there, from Flynn's day, and he, in 4 or 5 instances on his plans, called for a little group, a little section of trees. And those are still there, and they're beautiful. And all the old volunteers are the really old cottonwoods. And then you had a run of planting in the 50s, and then a run of planting in the 80s. And that first go around in 2008, they were full. They were just chock full of a bunch of Austrian pines and ash and locust that had recently been planted, and just absolutely um, choking off every open space was filled with pretty young trees. And it was clear that we were not going to go full Oakmont at Cherry Hills and just vaporize. Even if we had wanted to, that just was not going to happen there. But we did have some success in just saying, these are the reasons. There was even then there was certainly some accumulating wisdom as to tree removal and why it made sense in a lot of cases. So that was kind of the first and biggest correction that we sought to make there was just, getting that under control and getting all of the Flynn features kind of put back together as we saw them and as possible. And as time goes on, I think I'm really quite proud of because it's because they've played it pretty close to the vest. It's been really slow going on the tree removal, and the one thing about trees, once they're in decline, it's just a matter of time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really easy. As we've had a pretty light hand the last 10, 15 years. There's been a few decent sized projects like restoring the alignment of the creek. That was a pretty huge gain. We've taken some trees out, just kind of systematically over time, but we've also really been able to show off a lot of great specimen trees in the landscape that have just kind of had a chance to mature on their own. So I think it has a really nice balance of some new open space, some long range views, but also some really beautiful trees kind of dotting the landscape and still being part of the picture out there. So, but it's been, we had, as you said, right after CommonGround was kind of and it all stemmed from the need to put in an irrigation system. And when you put in a brand new irrigation system at an existing club, then the way to think about it is, and for your listeners, if you're getting ready to put a huge investment in your golf course, putting in an irrigation system, that's the golf course you're generally going to live with for the next 30, 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually the impetus to like restore something back to what it was, if it's worth restoring, and kind of let's get things back in order before we lock that in by putting all this pipe in the ground. And that was the impetus of the project at Cherry Hills. So it was essentially, bunker restoration, location, style, some green expansions, greens shrink over time, fairways shrink over time. There's bunker splash build up next to hole locations. So you kind of fix that stuff. And it's due for some of those things again. It's closing in on 20 years since we did the major work there. So we're getting ready to, in planning to make, take another swipe at really making some significant improvements. It's already a pretty darn good golf course, but there are things that, can always be better and more refined, and we're kind of working on that now.
So speaking of a pretty good golf course, there's the arguably the greatest U.S. Open ever held was at Cherry Hills, 1960. Arnold Palmer, and the confluence of the up and coming Jack Nicklaus, Palmer's real emergence and on the scene as the most charismatic, Arnie's Army TV, Ben Hogan, who was kind of still competitive but winding down, and just an incredible one for the ages for sure, and the comeback, of course, which everybody loves. And so I know Cherry Hills aspires to someday host another U.S. Open, and I know that's way out of both of our pay grades to know whether that's, and so I'm not asking you to speculate, but as an architect, and you look at the modern game and take out the realities of infrastructure and merchandising and TV compounds and parking and all those other things that you now need to host, just the golf course itself in the modern game, do you think Cherry Hills could hold its own in a U.S. Open based on the type of brand the USGA strives for the Open, for the U.S. Open?
I think it can, and I'll tell you why. One, you definitely, like as it is today, from the tees that are there today, no, because it does need some more length. But as you mentioned, the larger challenge is the footprint of that event, not just the golf course. A good kind of benchmark that I think of is they had 35,000 people on that property for the BMW, and I think it was 2013. And I think it was
2014. Yeah.
Was it 14? And I think within a year or two of that, I forget when the Open was at Marion, but I think they were having like 25,000 or 30,000 people on site for that. So that's one thing that, that you'd have to make an exception. But I would point to today, we were both watching the end of the Ryder Cup, before we got started here. And, it's the way we approach building new golf courses. The last undefeated force in golf is gravity. And it's the last line of defense for elite players. And with a couple of exceptions, 3 exceptions maybe, the greens at Cherry Hills have a lot of tilt. And, when they're firm and fast and rolling 14 and you get on the side of the hole or you get above the hole, it's like they can be really challenging. Whereas compared to Bethpage Black, and I grant you that they had the rough mown way down.
Right.
But that golf course got really soft. But each team shot about 5,000 under also because the greens don't have a lot of tilt. So there's not, even because they were getting pretty fast, but there were not just places like, I don't think he can keep this on the green, or I don't think he can keep this on the shelf, even with a putter in their hand, because they're that steep and severe and scary. Right. And that's the one thing that, all the golden age golf courses that we love so much is that, if they survive the 80s and the 90s when people were like, oh, these are too steep, we have to flatten them. If they survive that scare, that's like a pandemic that hopefully didn't affect your golf course. You made it through that. You still have your really super severe greens. That's really it. So if you find some places to, get some necessary yardage, and you have the rough at 5 or 6 inches, and you have the greens just hard as a rock and rolling 14, it's like, yeah, that is going to be a harder golf course than Bethpage was today.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I don't think they're, it's always been a little bit about the mileage out there. You definitely need some, you just need some more meaty par 4s.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Everybody's, every US Open for probably the rest of my life is going to be a par 70. Take, pick 2 par 5s and make them 4s. That's 2 of the holes you need.
Yeah.
And then you just got to find some extra long tees and let the short ones be short. Let them drive it up around the first green. That'll, you don't have a ton of room for, you can kind of go down by that lake tee. I think certainly for the Thursday, Friday, when you've got 156 players out there. But for the weekend, you can have them up on the Palmer tee and, whatever, 4-wood hybrid. I don't know what they're hitting around one green, but that's the thing. It's like, you don't try to stretch out. You don't look at the scorecard in general. You're just going to have a few, 350 drivable 4s, so that if you have a few of those and you have 165 yard par 3, that's going to bring your overall yardage down. So you can't really look at it that. You have to look at the individual holes, like 540 par 4, 570 par 4, 535 par 4. That's how you need to balance it out.
Yeah.
That's what Marion does. That little hole at Marion, that little 13th hole is, I don't even know if it's 140 yards.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we wrap up here, and this has been exactly what I'd hoped, just a fun reminiscence for both of us, but also a little insight into the world of golf course design and construction, and from a true Coloradan, a true Indian tree, wet behind the ears, kid picking up tabs for free golf. What is your overall attitude about the game and its health? And I mean, when you're out there, you have a lot of time to contemplate. And I tend to be, a combination of reflective, philosophical, and cynical. And I just look at the game and what it was intended to be and the way it's played today. And it's funny, I was just last night watching a replay of the 19, what year was it? It was when Borg beat McEnroe to win his fifth straight Wimbledon. And it was such a different sport. I mean, it looked more like badminton than tennis. They're like literally these floaters and and just the sound of the ball was just this very, elegant almost, this little ballet out there on the grass. And now it's just they're ripping the ball, grunting. You could point the same thing at any sport, the power game and the way it is today. But I guess I just am nostalgic for the game of 3-shot holes and the Shell's Wonderful Worlds of Golf. And when I grew up caddying at Denver Country Club, a set of clubs was a set of clubs. You had them for your life. That was it. And now I just look at what is your take on it? So it makes me want to just go back in time. And the good thing is I don't hit it far enough to, it's still golf. A 6,500 yard golf course at altitude is plenty for me. So it's not about me. It's just looking at, I don't know. How do you see all that at this stage of your life?
I have a few thoughts. One, obviously, I think you clearly would agree that COVID was a huge boon to getting people back on the golf course. And the optimist in me really believes that the majority of people that really got into it for more of the right reasons and the things that you and I both view as like really good things. I feel like there's plenty of people walking. There were whether it was people coming back to the game that maybe dabbled, when they were kids and just like, oh wow, we can do this at least, or people new to the game. They just kind of have I feel like they had a kind of a renewed appreciation for what golf offers, which is getting outside, walking, getting some exercise, those type of things. In terms of how it's played, like at the elite level, you're talking about watching all those great old shows. I think the artistry is now in, like we talk about the green speeds and the steep old greens on these old golf courses. Really, the artistry now is how incredible these guys' short game is. And, when Arnie was driving the first or whatever was happening in 1960, the quality of the short game shots around the green was probably not as good as it is what is required now with how slick and fast they are. So, the long game is, they're just smashing it so far. And it's like, that Potgieter kid gives me nightmares, because if that's what's coming, that's like an order of magnitude beyond where it is now.
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy. But I do think there's some really, there's just elite talent still reveals itself. And I just think that happens a little bit more around the greens now and into the greens. And I've tried to, I still play a ton of golf. I love golf. I love to play as much as I can. And I have tried to really, be open and accepting of the fact that people enjoy golf differently now than how I have traditionally enjoyed golf.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was, I'm like the poster child, and you're probably the same. It's like, are you not entertained? I am fully entertained with a round of golf. It's like, I am mentally engaged. Whatever I'm doing out there, I don't need extra stuff, but I've really tried to be open to, like, if people have, like I still kind of, I'm being aged out. I don't want to like give up my vulnerability here, but I feel like I'm going to be aged out of my yardage program here pretty soon, because I just find heads and walk it off, or use a 150 stake, kind of ballpark it. I'm no better than that anyway.
Yeah.
But if, whether it's, rangefinders, music, personalized carts, whatever are the things that are, not traditionally part of the game that I grew up with. I don't begrudge people the fact that it's, there's just more people enjoying the game. So I'm kind of, I'm all in favor of just more people playing golf, however that works its way out.
Well, that's a pretty good way to wrap it up. And as much as it sort of pains me to agree with you, I want to be superior to all those people who don't get it and never will, and they're therefore inferior to you and me who get it. Golf is a walking game, by God, and it's the bag over your shoulder, and it's no music, and it's communing, and it's a match. It's no scorecard. But the good thing is there's room for everybody. It really is. And if, it's caddying, which is probably my biggest soapbox of all. I was just out at Rodeo Dunes today, and we're talking about creating a youth caddy program, or at least turning up the volume on youth caddying. And you know what? If you're out walking and you enjoy having the company of a full-on adult caddy who's giving you reads, that's not my cup of tea. I'd much rather have a young person who's learning and who I can mentor and just, I don't know, but there's a different strokes for different folks. So it's okay, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we're having this conversation because I was a young kid at a golf course and someone found a way for me to just be around golf. And for, parents of kids that have any sort of inclination to have their kid involved in golf, it's like there is no better place for a kid to spend a summer day than on a golf course, working a little bit. Maybe he gets to hit some balls afterwards and maybe sneak out and play, but just like, boy, that the day's already over. We've only been out here 9 hours. Can we just stay for one more or whatever, And it is just you learn so many great lessons. Kids learn how to be around grownups. That's harder and harder these days. And, I just think that would be, like you kind of reinvented the wheel a little bit at CommonGround. It's like, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to do it. And, you made that work. And I would love to see just more of a, because any place you can support a caddy program if you're not trying to help, grown up people make a living. You're just giving a kid something to do for 4 hours and, give them $40 or $50 and wow, everybody wins.
That's right. Well, Eric, great having you on. Really appreciate it. I can't wait to play 16 at CommonGround and hit my first shot out of that bunker here sometime.
I'm sure you're probably still flying it way over the bunker.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
We're gonna build one of those special back tees for you.
That's right. All right. Well, that's a wrap, and we'll do this again. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, man.